Hi, I'm Erik Voss, and Bird Box on Netflix left us with quite a few questions. Like, can a movie about people being tricked into killing themselves actually trick people into doing it in real life? Hope not. Beyond the various interpretations of Bird Box, what interests me the most is the mystery of the monsters themselves. Like, what are they exactly? How do they work? What do they look like? Are the birds in on it? They always are. Now, looking around, I can't really find a good, complete answer anywhere. So I'm going to do my best to explain the truth of these monsters and their origin. Spoiler warning if you haven't seen Bird Box yet. So first off, what are the monsters? We never actually see them in their form in this movie, aside from, some shadows and floating leaves, wrestling branches, etc. But in the opening minutes, we do learn the basics. Looking at the monsters drives people to commit suicide. Mass suicides began in Romania and then spread through Europe and Russia and the rest of the world. Now, the mass suicides are not pathological or viral, meaning that they're not caused by a virus or bacteria, some kind of epidemic or biological warfare. No, they're creatures. And these creatures appear to be autonomous. Like, they're not controlled by any hive mind where the consciousness of one creature is linked back to a central node, making them all part of one giant force of nature. So no, this isn't like the movie The Happening, where I guess Mother Nature was the real enemy there, or the real hero. Or other movies with alien drones all connected back to a mothership. Now, a little into the movie, Charlie, a doomsday conspiracy theorist, gives us his take.
You got world religion and mythology that's full of mentions of demons or spirit creatures with the entity that takes on the form of your worst fears or your deepest sadness or your greatest loss.
Now, we're not meant to take Charlie literally because clearly these things don't fit neatly in any folklore explanation. But Charlie is to this movie what the character Dustin is in Stranger Things, a hilarious super nerd who uses his reference space to try to explain the unexplainable. And just like Dungeons & Dragons creatures ended up being not the worst guide to the Demogorgon and the Mind Flayer, Charlie is also here to help us with references to demons from various world religions, all gained from his extensive research from Wikipedia. He cites Ahrens and Deva, both from Zoroastrian mythology of ancient Mesopotamia. The Ahrens is an evil spirit that seduces humans into giving in to their darker impulses. The Deva is a force of chaos and disorder. He also mentions the Surgot, a Christian occult demon mentioned in the Grimoire of Pope Honorius and the Secrets of Solomon. He's a character who opens all locks. The Hulai Jing is a nine-tailed fox spirit from Chinese mythology that can take human form. They can be good or bad. And the Puka is from Celtic folklore, a trickster demon who often takes the form of a rabbit. Pukas have actually shown up in pop culture in the play and the film Harvey, possibly in Donnie Darko. I don't know if that thing was technically a puka. Now, this whole idea of a shape-shifting demon that takes the form of your greatest fear, it's come up again and again in pop culture as well. Like Pennywise in Stephen King's It embodies one's fear, depending on who's looking at him. The Boggart in Harry Potter, of course. And the demon in the movie It Follows actually works very similarly. It's something whose true form we never actually see. It shapeshifts into whatever form will help it get closer to its prey. But these monsters in Bird Box aren't exactly the supernatural demons that Charlie describes. Like, they have shadows, which means they must block sunlight. They have mass and weight. They move leaves and branches, triggering car motion sensors. They have some strength because they seem to be able to nudge their car a little bit, and they can lift up some of girls' hair. They just can't directly harm you. Like, they can't open doors or break through walls. They can't maul you to death or bite you or cut you. They can only get inside your head and compel you to look at them, and then you'll kill yourself. This trigger takes a visual form of the victim's eyes deforming. They become tear-stricken and bloodshot, dilation of the pupils. So when we see Mallory and the kids running from them in the woods, they weren't really running from physical danger. They're just running from the sounds that these creatures use to influence them. Not today, Satan. But for the characters who do see these monsters, what do they see? Remember, Charlie described it to us as an entity that takes the form of your worst fears, your deepest sadness, or your greatest loss. So when Mallory's sister, Jess, sees it, she looks at it and gasps, "Oh my God, what the F is that?" And then she goes into this trance. In her case, I'm assuming this could be her worst fear. Her initial reaction just seems terrified. Shortly after this, when Douglas's wife, Lydia, sees it, we hear a woman's voice whisper, and she goes into a trance saying, "Mom, please don't go," before she sits in a fiery car. Presumably her mother, whom Douglas said died years earlier, was Lydia's greatest loss. Later in the movie, when Olympia sees a monster, she becomes transfixed and she says, "You're not so bad." Now in her case, I'm wondering if the monster's taking the form of her greatest sadness, like maybe being alone. And toward the end of the movie, when Tom sees it, listen closely to the whispers that he hears. It's hard to make it out, but it sounds kind of like the voice of Mallory, making me think that what he sees is his greatest fear or his greatest sadness, the image of Mallory and the kids dying. which might explain why he's able to resist a bit longer to kill that gang member. Now, according to the film's crew, one deleted scene was going to show us what the creatures looked like in a nightmare sequence with Mallory. Sandra Bullock described it as a green man with a horrific baby face. It was snake-like. See, when they filmed it, she told the crew to surprise her with this monster, and it ended up making her laugh. She called it a long, fat baby, growling at her. Now, of course, this long, fat, green baby could have been a projection that Mallory sees, like a metaphorical embodiment of her fear of motherhood. Oh yeah, I'm very glad we didn't see it. Now, another possible glimpse of the monster appeared in sketches by Gary, the newcomer who betrays the group. We learn after this that he is probably one of the mentally ill patients who had seen one of the creatures. We could see how his eyes have been affected, but he considers them to be beautiful. His drawings show various creepy forms, some of which seem inspired by H.P. Lovecraft. He was the author who created Cthulhu, a massive looming cosmic demon who drives its observers mad. But again, these drawings only depict what Gary saw. And it brings us to another big question. Why can some people see the monsters without turning suicidal? When they first meet Gary, he tells them that escaped inmates from Northwood, a mental institution for the criminally insane, forced people's eyes open. They didn't need blindfolds.
They wanted to see. They were happy. They were so glad. And they said everyone needed to see.
Of course, Gary ends up being one of these guys, along with the man who waded out to Mallory's boat earlier, Charlie's grocery store co-worker Fish Fingers, who's an ex-con that Charlie called a bit crazy. He ended up forcing Charlie to look at the monster. And of course, the marauding gang that they run into later. The conclusion we're meant to draw is that, assuming the monsters take the form of your worst fear, deepest sadness, or greatest loss, maybe people have already suffered their worst fears, sadnesses, and losses are unaffected. It's a potentially problematic idea, but I guess Bird Box is suggesting that what is already broken cannot be broken again, and perhaps by seeing their darkest demons break other people, that becomes a sort of validation for the criminally insane. Like they sort of become the one-eyed men in the land of the blind. Like finally, the rest of the world recognizes my demons as real. And in these people's eyes, it makes the monsters sort of their salvation. That's what makes them beautiful. So we know what these people want, but what about the monsters themselves? What is their end goal? Charlie interprets these creatures as demons bringing about the apocalypse. And I suppose they could be extraterrestrial or interdimensional beings with telepathic powers aiming to destabilize human society and exterminate us. And it is interesting that they were first spotted in Romania, of all places, one of the regions associated with vampire folklore. Vampires, like these creatures, cannot enter homes without invitation. They can be invisible. They can take multiple forms. They sparkle in the sunlight. Forget that last one. But these monsters in Bird Box don't appear to want Earth for resources or colonization. Like, their movement is a little mindless and wandery. They're not tactical at all. Like, you would think they would try to whisper through the walls of the suburban house to trick the humans into opening a door or a window, rather than just, sitting there and waiting for someone to accidentally see them. I would say they really are more of a force of nature than like predators with agendas. And speaking of nature, this whole idea of mass suicides reminded me of the lemmings. Those Norwegian rodents whom for years people mistakenly believed commit mass suicide by running off cliffs into the ocean and drowning. But it's a big misconception. Lemmings don't intentionally commit suicide. See, when they're overpopulated, some lemmings will follow biological urges to migrate by swimming to nearby unoccupied land, and unfortunately some jump into the open ocean by mistake and accidentally drown. It's very sad. But what if these monsters are kind of the same thing? Like, maybe they're not new arrivals to Earth. Maybe they're just biological forces that have always been here, floating around us since the dawn of time. Some select individuals could have already witnessed them, but maybe for the rest of us, only when the human species reached a brink of overpopulation did these migratory instincts present themselves in monster form. But instead of us migrating to a new island or a peninsula across a fjord, our instincts drive us to migrate to the other side of existence, propelling us in front of traffic or out of windows. Just another interpretation for you to keep in mind, but here's my question for you. What do you think each character actually saw when they looked at the monster? For example, do you think it's possible that Jess's WTF vision was actually her sister, Mallory, dead, alone, her child never born? And that's why she gives her that second look after the car accident and she steps in front of the bus. Like what she's seeing there with Sandra Bullock on the ground is her worst fear come to pass. Comment down below with your thoughts and follow New Rockstars on Twitter at New Rockstars. Follow me on Twitter and Instagram at EA Voss. And subscribe to New Rockstars for breakdowns of everything you love. Game of Thrones, we do horror films, Stranger Things, we really cover it all here. Wait, what is that? Oh my God, I'm going to continue to eat a high-fat diet and get little to no exercise. It's still suicide, it's just slower.